So what do I mean by Dana White versus Conor McGregor? Well, we have Dana White who is saying it's very hard to bring Conor McGregor back. He has a lot of money. He doesn't really want to fight. Delay, 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 delay. And then we have Conor McGregor, who's coming out in every interview I've seen and saying, I want to fight. I really want to fight. The UFC are holding me back. And this becomes a game of who do you believe, really? It's, do you believe Conor McGregor? Or do you believe Dana White? It's very simple. Do you believe Conor McGregor or Dana White? So we have to go over what reasons Dana White would have to delay Conor McGregor coming back. One of those, in my opinion, is the ego that Dana White has. See, when we look at the UFC and who fights, we don't see the fighters first. We see UFC. This is a UFC event. And with boxing, it's the opposite. We see the fighters and we're like, oh, the fighters are fighting. This is going to be a massive event. And then we see who the promoter is. And Dana White is very adamant on the viewers seeing UFC, the company first, and then the fighters. And so that brings into question, is his ego big enough that he doesn't want a fighter like Conor McGregor to outshine the UFC brand itself? Because when Conor McGregor did join the UFC, he became bigger than the UFC. He was the biggest star, arguably still is the biggest star in MMA. And maybe it's that Dana White doesn't want someone coming back, outshining what the UFC has become and controlling what's going on. Because Dana White has an ego and we all know it. That's one option. That's one side of the story. The other is that Conor McGregor's life, not his life, that's harsh. Conor McGregor's MMA career is on a downward spiral and that he's saying anything that he can to stay relevant. That's definitely plausible. The Dana White option is plausible as well. Actually, before I move on, the fact that he says, Dana White says that dealing with someone that has a lot of money makes fights harder. I'm sorry, but there are plenty of fucking fighters that have a lot of money and they are fighting all the time. I mean, I'll go to boxing. Anthony Joshua has a load of money. Tyson Fury, Alexander Usyk has a lot of money. And I'm sure if I was more awake and I'd have my coffee, I could give you suggestions as to UFC fighters that have a lot of money that are still fighting, but I'm tired. That is not an excuse. I am so sorry. That is really not an excuse. Pulling out the old money card, and I think this is one of the narratives that people need to get out of their head when it comes to MMA. Just because a fighter has a lot of money doesn't mean he doesn't want to fight. And I know there's the whole thing of when you wake up in silk sheets, it's harder. Floyd Mayweather was one of the richest boxers and still managed to stay undefeated. So I'm sorry, it's bullshit. It's just one of those easy sayings that Dana White can say that will deflect the argument that is, why is Conor McGregor not fighting? And then very much so, it could be the other way around. It could be that Conor McGregor is just trying to stay relevant. He did the Ultimate Fighter to boost his stock, let's say. And now he just wants to stay relevant. He's got proper 12 going. He's got a happy family. You know, he's bringing the money in. But personally, in my opinion, I think Conor McGregor wants to fight again. Everyone who has been around him has been saying he wants to fight again. Eddie Hearn has said he wants to fight again. And that brings me on to my next bit of news for you guys. Boxing promoter Eddie Hearn says, I would pay whatever cost to bring McGregor back. And I totally agree. Now, when he says whatever cost, you'd think that a McGregor fight night makes profit. But let's go over the scenario that McGregor comes back and fights Chandler. They lose money, right? Because McGregor's asking for so much. Even that would be worth it for me. Because I know that the value of the company skyrockets with McGregor in the promotion. Even if you were to make a loss with McGregor versus Chandler, the value of the company would go up so much that you'd make up for that loss, or you'd probably make even more on other fights. And just having him around the sport, talking about the sport, doing interviews would make you enough money as it is. So for me, I completely agree with Eddie Hearn here. Bring McGregor back, whatever cost, it doesn't matter. It will bring eyeballs to the sport. I mean, Eddie Hearn says this, if it was me, and it's not me, and Dana certainly doesn't need my advice, but bringing McGregor back, whatever it costs, he says. He injects an enthusiasm and a vibrancy into the UFC that no one else can. There is no one in the sport who can make it happen for the UFC and MMA like Conor McGregor. Completely agree with Eddie Hearn. Don't agree with everything he does, but in this scenario, he is correct. And I believe that if Conor McGregor was a boxer, we would have seen him fight 4 or 5 times already. But it's just that the UFC works in a way that Dana White is the boss and he has an ego. That is my opinion. But Eddie Hearn, completely correct. Moving on swiftly, could a fight between Ryan Garcia and UFC's SeanOMalley ever happen? Now, let's be real. You would have to be thick as shit to think that Ryan Garcia could survive in an octagon for more than 1 round with SeanOMalley. SeanOMalley and Ryan Garcia have been going at it online. Ryan Garcia believes that he is naturally talented. He said that he out-wrestled his bodyguard, who was a wrestler, and that means that he can beat SeanOMalley. Now, SeanOMalley, it would take him 1 round to decapitate, strangle, or do whatever he wanted to Ryan Garcia. And Ryan Garcia, I'm going to do a separate video on it, is not in a good place. He's calling out everyone and anyone in different sports. I mean, if you saw the press conference that he was in lately, he looked on something. He looked like he was on a substance, whether that be weed, alcohol, something else. He was sweating profusely. He was slurring his words. He's not in a good place. And now he's calling out all these other fighters. And I will do a separate video dissecting that press conference, but he's definitely not in a good place. And SeanOMalley rightly replied with a video of him laughing. I think there's a really weird dynamic we have in sports in general where athletes believe they can beat anyone at any sport. They believe that if you're talented in one sport, you'll be talented in another. And boxing and MMA are completely different sports. I mean, I was a pro athlete. I was sparring the other day. I'm shit. I'm terrible. And I have athletic ability. I don't want to big myself up. But these athletes think that because they can compete in one sport, they can compete in every other sport, and that's just not the way it works. I think fighting is a whole different ballpark. I've certainly learned that from sparring. Fighting is a animalistic, primal thing that people do, and I wouldn't even consider it a sport. It's something completely separate, on a league of its own. But no, Ryan Garcia couldn't beat SeanOMalley in an octagon. As to whether a fight could ever take place, yes, it could. I didn't answer the question correctly, to be fair, now looking at it. Definitely could in boxing. And I think SeanOMalley would do well in boxing with the hands he has. I mean, we've seen that MMA guys can box, with Ngannou crossing over and, in my eyes, beating Tyson Fury. But at the lighter weight classes, I believe it's a little bit different. It's a bit different because the boxing technique comes more into play. I'm not saying that Ngannou doesn't have technique, but when these MMA people go over to boxing and they are heavyweights, they still have that one punch chance, and they have that power that can get them out of trouble. But when these lighter weight class fighters go over to boxing, it is more about technique, and these guys have been boxing for their entire lives. But I do think that if anyone can go over and do well in the lighter weight classes, SeanOMalley is one of the guys that I would put forward. And so as to whether a fight could ever take place, yes, I guess yes is the answer in boxing, but not in MMA. Ryan Garcia would be absolutely destroyed. Then we have Chael Sonnen responds to Jorge Masvidal's fight call out with the classic line, "I will not let him get close." Now, I haven't looked too much into this. This has only pinged onto my radar recently, but according to my sources, Jorge Masvidal has been beefing Chael Sonnen. Chael Sonnen is obviously undefeated, undisputed, the GOAT of all fighting sports, to be honest. My idol. And anyway, here is a quote we have. This is from Chael Sonnen. "I will not let him get close. I cannot trust Jorge Masvidal. Jorge Masvidal will be in Miami next week, where I will be. Jorge Masvidal will be at a fight week next week, where I will be. I mean, it sounds to me like we're starting to bring the pieces together. Now he will have to wave to me. I will have to send up an usher to bring him a few levels down so we can get a little bit closer to the action where I'll be seated, but we can have that chat. I will be the person in the nice trimmed suit with the somewhat dimmed glasses and a crowd of people onlooking. I assume he will be the thug with a hood up that I need to have an eye out for. Now, this is classic Chael Sonnen, but my opinion on this is much like the McGregor situation, where you could believe that McGregor is spiraling down, his career is crushing before him and he's trying to stay relevant. I believe this is Jorge Masvidal trying to stay relevant. Now, if you have to beef a 46-year-old retired MMA fighter in Chael Sonnen to stay relevant, you know your career is on a downward spiral. And I used to be a fan of Jorge Masvidal, and I do not like Colby Covington at all. The fact that Jorge Masvidal had to sucker punch Colby Covington to beat him up, basically, and gave him brain damage is pathetic in itself. It's embarrassing for the sport. It shows that he's a pussy, in my opinion. You don't do those things. If you go to fight a man, you go in front of him and say, we are fighting, let's fight. Right? That's the way I've been brought up. If you have a problem with someone, you meet face to face and you sort it out. Firstly with words, and then if you can't do it with words, it will probably end up in a fight. So in my books, Jorge Masvidal has gone down very much so. And the fact that he is now beefing or arguing with Chael Sonnen, who's 46 years old, who's had his MMA career, he has a family. Yes, he says controversial things, but if you are intelligent enough, you can tell that he's doing it to get views and he's doing it for fun. He does it for fun, and he's very good with his words. The fact that you have to beef that guy to stay relevant is pathetic. And Jorge Masvidal's career is spiraled downhill, very much so. He was at one point the cover of the UFC game. He was the man after his famous flying knee on Ben Askren, who, by the way, is underrated. He had a great career before the UFC. I could do a video on that, maybe not, I don't know. But yeah, pathetic from Jorge Masvidal, in my opinion. I don't think that Chael Sonnen should give him the light of day. I don't think he should respond to anything. But Chael Sonnen, in classic Chael Sonnen fashion, will be responding to this because it brings him numbers. And actually, if they were to fight, I actually think Chael Sonnen would stand a good chance. And that's just my opinion.